Making headlines for this week of May 20th. Counterpunches. Saudi Arabia strikes back at U.S. legislation to sue for 9/11. Throwing the gauntlet down. EU power brokers resort to threats to scare UK into staying in union. Hollywood gone dark. British actor speaks out on the seedy side of Hollywood, comparing it to UK scandal. And disclosure synchronicities. Seemingly unrelated events follow media interest in Obama being disclosure president.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. The gloves appear to be coming off, and the battle appears to be heating up as the truth about 9/11 and who was really responsible for the attacks moves more and more into the public spotlight. Last week, CVN reported that the U.S. government had passed legislation that would apparently be aimed publicly at the government of Saudi Arabia as being responsible for the attacks against the people of the U.S., but it has also been speculated quietly that the legislation may also open the door for lawsuits against countries like Israel for its involvement in that event, as well as others. The government of Saudi Arabia, however, seems to feel that if they are going to be thrown under the bus, they are not going to go alone. Jay Sermopoulos, writing for the Free Thought Project on May 23rd, has reported that in response to the U.S. Senate's unanimous vote to allow 9/11 victims' families to sue Saudi Arabia in federal court, a report published in the London-based Al Hayat Daily by Saudi legal expert Khatib al-Shamari claims that the U.S. masterminded the terror attacks as a means of creating a nebulous enemy in order to garner public support for a global war on terror. The report by al-Shamari, translated by the Middle East Media Research Institute, or MEMRI, claims that long-standing American policy is built upon the principle of advanced planning and future probabilities, which the U.S. has now turned toward the Saudi regime after being successfully employed against first the Taliban and al-Qaeda, then Saddam Hussein and his secular Ba'athist-controlled Iraq. Al-Shamari claims the recent U.S. threats to expose documents implicating the Saudi government are simply the continuation of a U.S. policy which he refers to as victory by means of archive. He highlights that during the initial invasion of Iraq under George H.W. Bush, Saddam Hussein was left alive and in power to be used as a bargaining chip, but upon deciding that he was no longer an ace up their sleeve, Washington moved to topple his government and install a U.S.-backed ruling party. Al-Shamari was also quoted as saying that September 11th is one of the winning cards in the American archives because all the wise people in the world who are experts on American policy and who analyze the images and videos of 9/11 agree unanimously that what happened in the Twin Towers was a purely American action, planned and carried out within the U.S. Proof of this is the sequence of continuous explosions that dramatically ripped through both buildings. Expert structural engineers demolished them with explosives, while the planes crashing into them only gave the green light for the detonation. They were not the reason for the collapse. But the U.S. still spreads blame in all direction. The policy can be dubbed victory by means of archives. On September the 11th, the U.S. attained several victories at the same time that even the hawks in the White House could not have imagined. Some of them can be enumerated as follows. 1. The U.S. created, in public opinion, an obscure enemy, terrorism, which became what American presidents blamed for all their mistakes and also became the sole motivation for any dirty operation that American politicians and military figures desire to carry out in any country. The terrorism label was applied to Muslims and specifically to Saudi Arabia. Number 2, utilizing this incident, 9/11, the U.S. launched a new age of global armament. Everyone wanted to acquire all kinds of weapons to defend themselves and at the same time battle the obscure enemy, terrorism. Even though up to this very moment we do not know the essence of this terrorism of which the U.S. speaks, except to say that it is Islamic. Number 3, the U.S. made the American people choose from two bad options. Either live peacefully but remain exposed to the danger of death by terrorism at any moment, or starve in safety because the country's budget will be spent on sending the Marines, even as far as Mars, to defend you. Although the issue is finally being brought more into the mainstream once again, there is still much discernment needed, even with this information being revealed this week. There are videos and comments made from official sources suggesting that no planes were used in any of the events of 9/11. There is a degree of truth that will still be hard for many to digest. There was no plane in Pennsylvania, as confirmed by the coroner who was interviewed by the media on the day of 9/11. There was no plane that hit the Pentagon, as the evidence suggests only a hole was present, meaning that it was a missile of some kind. There are also videos that appear convincing enough to suggest that it was not even a real plane to hit the Twin Towers, but merely holographic images of planes, supported by almost perfectly timed explosions after the plane disappeared into the building, suspiciously without breaking glass. So the U.S. is publicly attempting to open up lawsuits against Saudi Arabia when there is evidence to suggest that there were no planes, and therefore there were no alleged terrorists, and that it was a well-orchestrated event to justify the war of terror carried out by Western interests, including the U.S., Israel, and arguably others. On a recent episode of the Kaiser Report, Max Kaiser was speaking with someone whose name did not appear on screen, but he was an American who seemed to have some high-level information. Although this is not directly related to 9/11, the information shared is relevant to all the events that have happened since 9/11 and could also include 9/11 itself.
I just want to move on to Europe here for a second. There are several terror events in Europe by Europeans recently. Now, each one of the bad guys was already known to security services. A good example being here in the UK, they had somebody who was on MI5's radar. He went off to join ISIS, and he became Jihadi John. So, your thoughts? Is this because we have too much data or too many people on the terror watch list? There's not enough real intelligence. What's going on here?
Well, Max, this may be too much for you guys, but let me give you the bottom line as I see it. Number one, there is no negotiating with banks. The hell with them. Throw them out of the country, go back to public banking. Okay? Period. Number two, most terrorists are false flag terrorists or are created by our own security services. Now, I have no direct access in England, but I will tell you that here in the United States, every single terrorist incident we have had has been a false flag or has been an informant pushed on by the FBI. In fact, we now have citizens taking out restraining orders against FBI informants that are trying to incite terrorism. We've become a lunatic asylum. As far as Jihadi John, the best guess that I can give you is that this is funded by Saudi Arabia, trained by CIA. This destruction of ancient artifacts and so on, that's a covert action influence operation. That's not something they would normally do. This is, in one word, largely theater.
At this time, it is unclear as to where all the throwing around of blame will lead and what consequences this will have to all parties involved. However, the actions do seem to suggest that a pot of hot liquid is boiling over, and it could be hinting that there is going to be one very large mess to clean up as the public gets wind of just how badly they have been lied to and how badly the world has been forced to live under this falsified illusion of terrorists being other than those who have created the illusion for the purposes of control, fear, enslavement, profit, and power. In other geopolitical news, the global cabal partners of the European Union appear to be throwing down the gauntlet to the people of the UK and also to Prime Minister David Cameron. An article appearing on the London Times website on May 21st by Bruno Waterfield and Sam Coates reports the following. Britain would be shut out by the rest of the European Union and treated like deserters if the country voted to leave next month, Jean-Claude Juncker suggested yesterday. The President of the European Commission broke his promise to David Cameron not to intervene in the referendum and told Le Monde in France that Britain, after Brexit, would not be handled gently. The article also adds that he also urged France to revive demands for deeper EU integration to counter British Euroscepticism in an intervention that is unlikely to be welcomed by the Prime Minister. The threat appears to be very direct and very clear. Deserters will not be welcomed with open arms, Juncker told the French newspaper. The intervention would seem to suggest an increasing desperation among those attempting to maintain the European Union project, a project that is increasingly being viewed by many across Europe as a forced tool of enslavement, instead of a project that truly has the interests of its people at heart. The Lord Mayor of London City, Boris Johnson, wrote an article for the London Telegraph on May 22nd, and in his letter to the people he wrote that it is now generally agreed among historians that Britain's departure from the EU really began in 1991, a quarter of a century before the famous Brexit referendum. It was then that the UK government took the controversial decision to opt out of the third stage of European monetary union, thereby ensuring that the British people would be able to keep the pound sterling rather than being forced to use the euro. When this historic rupture was confirmed by the Labour government in 2003, there was widespread condemnation from those in British banking and business who were traditionally nervous of being left out of any European project, as well as from some politicians. Johnson goes on to note that history appears to have worked in the favour of the UK. Johnson writes, by imposing a one-size-fits-all monetary policy on very different economies, the euro became a disaster. Unprecedented levels of unemployment were experienced in some Mediterranean countries. The French were sunk in malaise. The Greek economy shrank by a quarter, and yet the entire energies of the EU political class were devoted to rescuing this project. Johnson believes that the referendum of 2016 offers the people of the UK the worst of both worlds. He notes that there were at least two major ways in which, through membership of the EU, the British were exposed to the consequences of the euro catastrophe. The first was immigration. Johnson writes, thanks largely to the decision to keep the pound and the flexibility that went with an independent monetary policy, the UK was a zone of relatively high growth, a comparative El Dorado of job creation. This meant that the UK experienced substantial waves of immigration by people in search of work, partly from Eastern Europe, but also from the southern countries that had been devastated by the euro. Johnson adds, in their desperation to save the euro, the Brussels authorities had set an ambitious agenda to go further and faster with a United States of Europe. Reading the fine print, the British discovered that there was nothing they could do to veto such moves towards a fiscal and political union, as detailed in the Five Presidents' report, nor could they stop further centralization from applying to Britain. Johnson closes with an interesting yet valid point. By the spring of 2016, many electors were thinking that the EU was moving in a completely wrong direction, with some polls even predicting a vote to leave. A highly nervous UK government resorted to a series of scare tactics. Hysterical claims were made about house prices, food prices, World War III, and other non-existent boogeymen. The American president was himself prevailed upon to campaign for the UK to remain, even though, as he was repeatedly reminded, the US would not dream of compromising its independence in the manner required of EU members. It would be very unfair, for sure, for the US to impose upon the UK to join the EU Union when the US itself would not welcome such a situation being imposed upon the US. The UK referendum takes place on Thursday, June 23rd. In a few quick headlines for the week, Catherine Hardy of Euronews has reported on May 27th that a second minister within the government of Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel has now offered his resignation, in protest to the appointment of a far-right politician, Avigdor Lieberman, to the important position of defense. This followed the resignation last week of Moshe Ya'alon, who stepped down from the defense ministry, citing his lack of faith in Netanyahu. Hardy reported that commentators say this is aimed at strengthening Netanyahu's governing coalition, which now has 6 parties and control of more than 66 of Parliament's 120 seats. This solidifies Netanyahu's position a bit more, with an increase from a razor-thin majority of 61. Netanyahu appears intent on continuing his warpath and also appears to not be concerned at all with what people or other politicians are thinking, a sign that some might consider to be dangerously unstable. Greece appears to once again be in financial trouble, and it appears that Russia may be attempting to once again open a door for the country. An announcement from the Kremlin, reported on the GreekReporter.com website, reported that Mr. Putin will meet with President of Greece Prokopis Pavlopoulos and Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras on May 27th and 28th. The summit talks will focus on key aspects of bilateral trade, economic and investment cooperation, including projects in the energy and transport sectors. Particular emphasis will be given to cultural and humanitarian cooperation. There will also be an exchange of views on current international and regional issues. Mary Harris, the writer, adds that Putin has not visited an EU member state for more than a year. His visit may coincide with that of Patriarch Kirill of Moscow to Greece from May 27th to 29th. The Patriarch of the Russian Church has only this year begun to appear more on the global stage, and this may be a sign of some significant changes to come with regard to the role of the Church in global affairs, but also the increasing role of Russia in helping nations that are being threatened militarily and economically by the U.S. and the Western hegemonic system. Jack Rasmus, writing for TeleSurdTV.net, noted on May 25th that this past week the Greek Parliament voted by a narrow margin of 153 to 145 to impose even more austerity on its people, thus implementing the latest austerity demands by the Eurozone Troika required for the Troika's release of loans earmarked for Greece from last August of 2015. In light of the recent actions taken against Brazil in an attempt to install a government that will be more in line with U.S. and Western interests, Vladimir Putin is stepping up Russia's desire to assist South American nations in standing up to the threats of U.S. and Western hegemony. An article on the TeleSurdTV.net website on May 16th reported that Russia is willing to help Latin America assert itself against U.S. interventions in political affairs, said Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov on Monday. We are seeing a new intensification of U.S. foreign policy in this region, even up to direct attempts to interfere in the internal affairs of states in the region, he said in an interview with RIA Novosti. Deciding which foreign policy to choose is a sovereign right and even the obligation of the state. Ryabkov said that a solution must be political and regional, but must not rule out diplomatic cooperation with allies like Russia, which would establish constructive interaction with authorized representatives from all segments of the political forces in the region. It's clear that there is a meaningful change in political preference, not only to the center, but also to the right, to the more neoliberal, he added. Argentina, Brazil, and Venezuela are only the most obvious examples. Telesurd is reporting that the coup in Brazil is merely the latest in a series of illegal maneuvers to remove progressive presidents across the entire Latin American region. In financial news, it is very unclear what is going on in Europe right now with regard to who has the greater control over affairs of the continent, the EU Council and its other partners within the global cabal, or the powers that are seeking to take away the power from the corrupted interests that have been in control. A report coming from one source in the UK, the London Express, appears to be one of the leading sources reporting on information that may lead to the ultimate breakup of the European Union. This would be a very good thing by the reports of most who are eagerly waiting for the final collapse of this global cabal entity. Lana Clemens, writing on May 27th, appears to be one of the few journalists, if not the only journalist, reporting the following. Panic over the stability of Spanish banks hit fever pitch yesterday, exposing yet another rupture in the financial system holding the Eurozone together. Clemens continues, Banco Popular, one of Spain's leading financial firms, caused mayhem after admitting that it needed billions to bolster its balance sheet. Shocked investors dumped shares in the firm, with the bank's stock's value plunging by 24% in the morning after the cash call and plans to issue another 2 billion shares. It resulted in €1.4 billion being wiped off the value of the bank's share price. And the worry spread to other Spanish banks, with shares in CaixaBank and Banco de Sabadell diving by 3.4% and 4.5% respectively. It comes after the country announced record debt levels, owing its creditors €1.1 trillion. Spain now owes more money than its entire economy generates in a year, and today's cash call by Banco Popular is now a visible sign of the strain financial institutions in Europe are under. Assuming this story is being reported accurately, it creates a bit of confusion as to what is going on in the country and also around the EU. It is very clearly a battle on some front, but this has not yet been wholly revealed to the people of Spain, the people of Europe, and particularly to the people of the UK, ahead of their Brexit vote in about 3 weeks' time. 1 week ago, Jason Taylor, also writing for the London Express, reported the following. The cash-strapped nation, referring to Spain, which now owes more money than its entire economy generates in a year, is plotting the bonanza at a time when it spends £38 billion annually on debt interest payments. And although the country is in clear breach of EU rules on its budget deficit, the European Commission has said it won't take any action. The EU wants all countries, especially those in the single currency, to keep their budget deficits below 3% of their annual gross domestic product, and has set targets for those not meeting the limit. But although countries can be fined up to 0.2% of their GDP if they fail to implement measures to meet the limits, Spain's defect is running at 5%, but bureaucrats confirmed today Spain would not be fined. EU Financial Affairs Commissioner Pierre Moscovici said this is not the right moment, economically or politically, to take that step. Other nations are said to be furious with the Spanish Prime Minister, especially Germany, which believes, quote-unquote, fiscal recklessness was the root cause of the post-2008 debt crisis. It is important to note that what is considered fiscal recklessness by members of the global cabal is different than what would be considered fiscal recklessness by the people. The global cabal desperately needs countries to remain enslaved to its corrupt system of banking, and therefore anything that goes against their interests and supports the interests of the people would be considered reckless. From the perspective of the general population, any agenda that supports austerity and supports the people getting screwed to benefit the 1% is considered reckless. As always, it is important to follow the money and to see who profits and also who is hurt the most by such financial decisions. Prime Minister Rajoy is facing re-election next month, and given the rise in public anger and the rise of new political parties such as Podemos, the current strategy may simply be one of not punishing the people of Spain until the election is over. It is being reported that a similar strategy is being used with the people of the UK, trying to keep information such as the riots in France and also the possible creation of a new European Union army secret until after the vote, and then hit the people with the news. As with any transition, there are always some elements of confusion, or even chaos, as situations and issues are dealt with either in preparation for or during the actual transition. CVN has reported over the last months and years how some countries appear to be moving along in creating the new financial model that will make the current one obsolete. whether this birthing financial system is destined to have a place for a long period of time, or whether it merely represents a short-term transition to a different economy where money will no longer be required, still remains to be seen. F. William Engdahl, writing for the New Eastern Outlook, wrote the following on May 18th. China, as current chair of the G20 group of nations, called on France to organize a very special conference in Paris. The fact that such a conference would even take place in an OECD country is a sign of how weakened the hegemony of the US-dominated dollar system has become. On March 31st in Paris, the special meeting named Nanjing II was held. People's Bank of China Governor Zhao Zhaochuan was there and made a major presentation on, among other points, broader use of the IMF special basket of 5 major world currencies, the special drawing rights. The invited were a very select few. The list included German Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble, UK Chancellor of the Exchequer George Osborne, IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde, discussed the world's financial architecture together with China. Apparently, and significantly, there was no senior U.S. official present. Engdahl notes the following about a Bloomberg article. On the Paris talks, Bloomberg reported China wants a much more closely managed system, where private sector decisions can be managed by governments, said Edwin Truman, a former Federal Reserve and U.S. Treasury official. The French have always favored international monetary reform, so they're natural allies to the Chinese on this issue. What makes this comment particularly interesting is the fact that France is the country being targeted with the greatest violence and protests from the people at this time, which suggests that there may be a connection to this. Engdahl also notes the following. China is clearly aiming at the re-establishment of an international gold standard, presumably one not based on the bankrupt Bretton Woods dollar-gold exchange that President Richard Nixon unilaterally ended in August of 1971, when he told the world they would have to swallow paper dollars in the future and could no longer redeem them for gold. Since 2015, China is moving very clearly to replace London and New York and the Western gold futures price-setting exchanges. In May of 2015, China announced it had set up a state-run gold investment fund. The aim was to create a pool, initially of $16 billion, making it the world's largest physical gold fund, to support gold mining projects along the new high-speed rail lines of President Xi's new economic Silk Road, or One Road, One Belt, as it is called. As China expressed it, the aim is to enable the Eurasian countries along the Silk Road to increase the gold backing of their currencies. In May of 2015, China's Shanghai Gold Exchange formally established the Silk Road Gold Fund. The 2 main investors in the new fund were China's 2 largest gold mining companies, Shandong Gold Group, who bought 35% of the shares, and Shaanxi Gold Group with 25%. The fund will invest in gold mining projects along the route of the Eurasian Silk Road railways, including in the vast underexplored parts of the Russian Federation. A little-known fact that is no longer is South Africa's the world's gold king. It is merely number 7 in annual gold production. China is number 1, and Russia is number 2. It is a movement by the emerging economies led by Russia and China that are seeking to unseat the West in general, but the U.S. in particular, from its fraudulent position of control of the global economy. Engdahl closes with the following. Now it happens that prime on the Beijing foreign asset to-buy shopping list are gold mines around the world. Despite a recent slight rise in gold price since January, gold is still at 5-year lows, and many quality-proven mining companies are cash-starved and forced into bankruptcy. Gold is truly at the beginning of a renaissance. Gold has worth in its own right throughout mankind's history. China and Russia, according to Engdahl, and other nations of Eurasia today are reviving gold to its rightful place. In general news, A few years ago, listeners may recall that when Iceland was going through the process of letting its big banks fail, arresting their bankers, and also their politicians, a process was initiated to have the people become involved in writing their new constitution through a process called crowdsourcing. The process was apparently completed, but stalled after the current government apparently seemed to feel that it was not a priority. Now, with the failure of the recent government, and with the rise of the pirate party in the small country, the crowdsourced constitution is being brought back as an election issue. It seems now, however, that one of the largest cities in the world has begun taking notice of the process that Iceland went through, and is now planning to follow Iceland and allow its citizens to help crowdsource a new constitution for their city. According to an article on the Minds.com website on May 19th, Mexico City has entered the 21st century as a front-runner for political change. In late April of 2016, Mayor Miguel Ángel Mancera created the initiative to entice the nearly 9 million citizens to help create and change the Constitution in real time. Mancera refers to it as a way to bestow the Constitution project with a democratic, progressive, inclusive, civic, and plural character. Apparently, until 2016, Mexico City existed in a way that was very similar, if not identical to Washington in the District of Columbia, London City, and also Vatican City. With more on this, we have this report from CCTV America.
Mexico City is trying something it's never done before, letting people have a voice in their new constitution. It's an experiment in digital democracy. CCTV's Mark Markovitz explains.
Mexico City is in the middle of an experiment in digital democracy. Its citizens are now voting online on ideas and proposals they want in their new constitution. This comes after President Enrique Peña Nieto approved legislation making the once federal district of Mexico City into its own sovereign city, giving this metropolis of over 8 million people more autonomy than ever in its history. The hallmark of this reform is for Mexico's capital to have its own constitution. Allowing citizens to vote and submit proposals for this new venture is the brainchild of Mexico City Mayor Miguel Ángel Mancera, who launched it online after creating a petition on the website change.org. Ideas that garner more than 10,000 digital signatures will then be presented before a team of experts who will have a final document ready in a few months. Some of the most popular proposals include creating more public space, banning zoos, and lowering the salaries of public officials.
Algo que yo creo que es muy rescatable es que verdaderamente la ciudadanía está planteando temas.
I think what the people are voting on are a series of expectations for the future. We don't know yet if these experts will seriously discuss them. But if they don't, they are going to face enormous pressure from the people for it to become part of the Constitution.
Quede finalmente en el texto de la Constitución.
Popular DJ Rulo David is one of 27 experts appointed by the mayor to consider these issues. His main points of interest are gay rights and constitutional protections for an independent media.
This is a very progressive city. The idea, I believe, is that the document will reflect the character of the city, will give a voice and protection to its people.
According to Alberto Herrera, officials within the mayor's office say this initiative has far exceeded expectations. Since being launched 2 weeks ago, already 250 proposals have been submitted and over 25,000 people have signed on to them. Martin Markovitz, CCTV, Mexico City.
City residents will have until September the 1st to submit their ideas and votes before the new draft of the Constitution will be prepared. Numerous subjects relating to covered-up secrets are beginning to explode into the public awareness at this time, and one of the more tragically sad stories relates to the cover-up of pedophilia in circles around the world. Although the subject of pedophilia in the UK has been making headlines in that country, but not elsewhere in the Western world, sources are starting to come forward to boldly expose crimes being committed by people who are supposed to be mentors and protectors to children in the acting profession. Hollywood has long been a drug that has brought many young people with dreams of fame and fortune to the doorsteps of people with power, and ended up selling their souls to the devil in exchange for their shot at fame. Some ended up in cult-like religions, such as Scientology, while others were drawn into being sex slaves. An article by Abe Hawken in London's Daily Mail on May 22nd has reported that Lord of the Rings star Elijah Wood claims that Hollywood has its own Jimmy Savile scandal and believes young actors are being sexually abused by predatory vipers in the industry. The Hobbit actor, now 35, told the Sunday Times that child abuse is probably still happening. Shocking allegations that top Hollywood figures have been protecting child abusers have circulated widely in recent years. Several industry figures have been convicted following claims of sex abuse, and former childhood actors, including the Goonies actor Corey Feldman, now 44, claimed he was surrounded by molesters when he was a teenager. CVN has reported in the past articles about Corey Feldman as he spoke out on the darkness that exists within the entertainment industry. Hawken also adds that Anne Henry, co-founder of Biz Parents, a group to help young actors, said that Tinseltown is currently sheltering around 100 active abusers. Wood, who stars in the new film called The Trust, sympathized with Savile's victims and said it must have been devastating. He told the Sunday Times that his mother had protected him from abuse when he first arrived in Hollywood, aged 8. But he said, "I've been led down dark paths to realize that these things are probably still happening." The actor, who played Frodo Baggins in Lord of the Rings, believes that other actors remain in danger. He added, "If you're innocent, you have very little knowledge of the world and you want to succeed. People with parasitic interests will see you as their prey. What upsets me about these situations is that the victims can't speak as loudly as the people in power." Henry believes that around 3/4 of child actors that went off the rails later in their lives had been abused in Hollywood. In the past, Feldman had spoken out on the subject, but had declined to name names, indicating that in his position it is usually the whistleblower victim that does not have legal protection. An article from Star magazine on May 26th writes that Corey Feldman appears ready to reveal Hollywood's pedophilia secrets. The former child star detailed his horrific past in his memoir, Choreography, but in light of Elijah Wood's explosive Twitter rant, is coming forward again. The article, the Star magazine article, suggests that Feldman is ready to name names, but this has not yet been verified as accurate. An article by Seth Abramovich on the Billboard.com website writes that, speaking now exclusively to the Hollywood Reporter, Feldman opens up about missing Corey Haim, his best friend, who was raped by a well-known man in the movie industry when he was 11. When asked in the interview about how high up this went in the industry, Feldman replied that, "I'm not going to name names. People are frustrated. People are angry. They want to know how this is happening and they want answers, and they turn to me and say, why don't you be a man and stand up and name names and stop hiding and being a coward? I have to deal with that, which is not pleasant, especially given the fact that I would love to name names. I'd love to be the first to do it, but unfortunately California, conveniently enough, has a statute of limitations that prevents that from happening. If I were to go and mention anybody's names, I would be the one that would be in legal problems, and I'm the one that would be sued. We should be talking to the district attorneys and the lawmakers in California, especially because this is where the entertainment industry is, and this is a place where adults have more direct and inappropriate connection with children than probably anywhere else in the world." The energies of these times are bringing more and more truth into the light to be revealed for all to see. As tragic as any story will be where harm is done to human life or any aspect of life, the best one can do at this time is to remain as much an observer as possible and send the highest energies possible that will continue to bring this subject not only into greater truth, but also that all involved will be able to resolve and heal all that can be healed for one's highest good according to one's soul-level contract at this time. It is not for us to act as judge and executioner. All we can do is send loving energy to allow for the highest good of all to unfold as quickly, as safely, and as comfortably as possible. In disclosure news this week, will 2016 finally be the year? The movement to continue putting pressure on Barack Obama and the White House to disclose information relating to the existence of civilizations and technologies of a non-Earth origin appears to be continuing and even picking up speed. Last week, CVN highlighted the comments made by the only UFO lobbyist in Washington, Stephen Bassett of the Paradigm Research Group. Bassett had been noting how some in the media were slowly starting to pick up on comments coming from the Clinton election campaign group, particularly from Clinton herself and her campaign manager, John Podesta. Bassett noted how the truth embargo, as he calls it, appears to be breaking, especially given that on at least 2 occasions, media have begun bringing up the question at White House press briefings. Up to now, the White House press secretary has been avoiding the question, but it seems more and more media are starting to pick up the story, including some sources that many might consider to be, quote-unquote, more legitimate, at least in the minds of some among the general public. Recently, MSN.com ran the story that Obama will reveal information about extraterrestrials and UFOs before he leaves office. In the article, Kirsty McCrum quotes Clinton when she appeared on the Jimmy Kimmel Show, saying that, "I'm going to do it again. There's a new name for UFOs. It's unexplained aerial phenomena. That's the new nomenclature. I would like us to go into those files and hopefully make as much of that as public as possible. If there's nothing there, let's tell people there's nothing there. If there is something there, unless it's a threat to national security, we ought to share it." Of course, McCrum and other journalists have not yet found the courage to call out comments such as these. Anything that is deemed to be a threat to the power and control of the global cabal can, and often is, lumped under the umbrella of being a threat to national security, meaning the global cabal, and not the general public at large. In response to the MSN coverage, Bassett responded on his Facebook page, writing the following: "What publication has the most U.S. page views? That would be MSN.com. How many? 1.5 billion per month. Guess who just ran an article on the Clinton-Obama disclosure process?" Just to be clear, there is pressure building around the Clinton team from the media regarding the Clinton ET Disclosure Rockefeller Initiative connection. This could lead to a full media engagement of the ET issue within the 2016 presidential campaign. That would lead to a lot of reporters heading on over to the Pentagon and to the White House briefing room with a lot of questions. That would force the Pentagon and White House to reach an understanding, allowing the president to make the announcement. So, watch for the media escalation. Russia's Sputnik News, Science World Report, the Ross Story, and numerous other media sources have begun picking up on the story, and this would lend credibility to Bassett's statement that the cover-up on this story, or the truth embargo, is in the process of being broken wide open. Even Google's newsfeed allowed several articles promoting the possible disclosure announcement from the White House. The Sputnik News article even made reference to the reboot of the TV series The X-Files earlier in 2016. According to the Sputnik News article, prior to the premiere of a 6-episode special reboot of the X-Files series in January, the CIA declassified hundreds of pages of UFO reports and photos. All of the documents were from the late 1940s to the 1960s and were kept secret until this year. It appears the CIA used the revival of the X-Files franchise as a convenient time to remind the public the agency has, in fact, engaged the extraterrestrial presence issue in the past, Bassett told the London Mirror after the document release. Sarah Burris, writing for the Raw Story, wrote that Clinton's senior campaign official, John Podesta, also served as top aide to President Obama. He is well known in political circles for having a Fox Mulder-like crusade to declassify the intelligence informations about UFOs, what the United States government knew, when it knew it, and that the reports should be available to Americans. Burris also references an article appearing on the Conway Daily Sun. Burris wrote the following: Hillary Clinton told Damon Steer of the Conway Daily Sun that Podesta has made me personally pledge we are going to get the information out, one way or another. Maybe we could have a task force to go into Area 51. Unfortunately, given the power of the global cabal, it just simply is not as easy as making an announcement to the world, even if it would be the simplest and best thing to do. The global cabal has infiltrated every aspect of our global society, and they have conditioned much of humanity to living in debt, in fear, and in separation. Separation not only from each other, but also separation from a divine creator, and also separation from life that exists beyond Earth. An article on the UFOinternationalproject.com website writes that Clinton won't be allowed to disclose the truth about the ETs. It's not allowed. This according to former U.S. National Security Chief Christopher Mellon. According to the article, Mellon strongly believes that Hillary Clinton's bid to crack open the country's alleged secret database of UFO intelligence reports and draw out the truth about the mysterious military base Area 51 in Nevada will most definitely hit a brick wall, even if she does become the next president. Mellon was quoted as recalling instances when White House officials sought briefings on highly compartmented Department of Defense programs and were flatly refused. According to Mellon, access to such programs is on a need-to-know basis. In general, nobody outside the Department of Defense, including the Secretary of State, is deemed to have a need to know. Officials like John Podesta and Secretary Clinton can easily serve for years in senior positions and be avid consumers of classified intelligence analysis, but never obtain access to the Department of Defense's compartmented programs, which mostly relate to new weapons systems. According to Bassett, however, his intention is not to support the political campaign of Clinton based on a promise that she may not likely deliver on. His campaign is to put pressure on Obama to become the disclosure president. It is interesting to note a few synchronicities in the follow-up to the attention being given to this story. The first comes from the UK. Alan Tovey, writing for the London Telegraph on May 21st, reported that Britain has the rather dubious distinction of being the only nation to have developed its own space launch capability, the Black Arrow rocket, and then abandoned it. But last week's Queen's speech revealed the UK's intention to get back into the space race after almost 50 years, with the government giving high-profile backing to the creation of a British spaceport and support for companies in the space industry. The Modern Transport Bill announced in Parliament revealed the aim to secure low-cost access to space for our world-leading small and micro-satellite industry, including helping drive through the complex legislation needed to certify space vehicles and their safe operation within UK airspace. The UK seems to be suddenly taking an increased interest in affairs relating to space. Another interesting note actually comes from the website of the White House, and this may have come in response to the press secretary stating to the media of the world that there are some things that the press secretary does not have access to, and information relating to the existence of ETs was one of them. However, according to the Office of the Press Secretary, in a statement published on the official White House page, President Obama has apparently stated the following on May 26th. Letter from the President, Space Report. Dear Mr. Chairman, dear Senator, dear Representative, I transmit herewith, in accordance with Section 1613 of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2016, Public Law 114-92, the report and classified annex on an integrated policy to deter adversaries in space. The report is the result of an interagency process with the objectives to reduce risks to the United States and our allies in space, and to protect and preserve the rights, access, capabilities, use, and freedom of action of the United States in space. Success will require a multi-year effort and commitment across all departments and agencies, and I look forward to your continued support. The timing of a statement such as this would seem very odd, given that, until recently, all formal communications have suggested that there was no life beyond Earth, or, at the very least, no intelligent life had entered into contact with entities on Earth. Therefore, why then would a statement be necessary at this time about deterring adversaries in space? Of course, with the language written here, it could easily be defended that he was referring to conflicts between Earth nations in space. But even this raises the question about the levels of technologies that would be required to have such a battle in space when the world has been told that no such technology exists. In response to some space whistleblowers, particularly a source known as Corey Goode, Goode has spoken out extensively on the existence of several deep space programs that have been kept militarized and thus hidden from the people of Earth. One of the programs of which he has spoken is a program called Solar Warden. A Huffington Post article by Darren Parks, as far back as 2012, touched on the Solar Warden program. At that time, Parks had written that since approximately 1980, a secret space fleet code named Solar Warden has been in operation, unknown to the public. Parks details some of his attempts to file Freedom of Information requests in 2010 on the subject. In one surprising response, this was part of a message he allegedly received. About 1 hour ago, I spoke to a NASA rep who confirmed that this was their program, referring to Solar Warden, and that it was terminated by the President. He also informed me that it was not a joint program with the Department of Defense. The NASA rep informed me that you should be directed to the Johnson Space Center, Freedom of Information Access Manager. Parks notes that the program is a classified operation, not only under the U.S., but also under UN authority, and this may relate to the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, or UNOOSA, which CVN referred to last week. Parks continues, writing that when Gary McKinnon hacked into U.S. Space Command computers several years ago and learned of the existence of non-terrestrial officers and fleet-to-fleet transfers and a secret program called Solar Warden, he was charged by the Bush Justice Department with having committed the biggest military computer hack of all time and stood to face prison time of up to 70 years after extradition from the UK. But trying Ernest McKinnon in open court would involve his testifying to the above classified facts, and his attorney would be able to subpoena government officers to testify under oath about the Navy's space fleet. To date, the extradition of McKinnon to the U.S. has gone nowhere. McKinnon also found out about the ships or craft within Solar Warden. It is said that there are approximately 8 cigar-shaped mother ships, each longer than 2 football fields end to end, and 43 small scout ships. The Solar Warden Space Fleet operates under the U.S. Naval Network and Space Operations Command. There are approximately 300 personnel involved at that facility, with the figure rising. Solar Warden is said to be made up from U.S. Aerospace Black Projects contractors, but with some contributions of parts and systems by Canada, the United Kingdom, Italy, Austria, Russia, and Australia. It is also said that the program is tested and operated from secret military bases such as Area 51 in Nevada. Yet, all that vital information never made it out into the mainstream, and only now is this starting to occur, it seems. So there is this supposedly huge announcement that is just waiting to be told to the world. I use the word supposedly because for many people around the world, the existence of our galactic families is no longer a secret, and it is generally accepted as a given. How might the world be told about this? One article by Duncan Forgan, appearing on the International Business Times, strangely enough, on May 26th, which is another unusual synchronicity. He explores this. Forgan writes, "If you've just discovered an alien civilization, how should you go about breaking the news? This is a monumentous task, and I've been involved in developing some guidelines for the scientists who are involved in searching for extraterrestrial life. The research is due to be published in the journal Acta Astronautica." The question was explored also in the Jodie Foster movie Contact. Foster's character was denied the initial opportunity to travel through the wormhole device because she did not believe in God. The argument was made that since over 95% of humans believe in God, it should be someone who has a belief in God that should be the first to make contact with a new civilization. The debate is rather pointless, as the evidence seems to suggest more clearly than not that civilizations beyond Earth have already been here and that there has already been contact with them, both positive civilizations and it seems also civilizations that have been less honorable in their intentions for the people of Earth. Forgan continues, in 1989, a committee of SETI scientists, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, the scientists even drew up a set of post-detection protocols to guide scientists through the steps after discovery. These steps include getting your colleagues to verify the discovery and notifying relevant national authorities, followed by the scientific community and then the public via a press release. However, this set of guidelines was written before the age of the Internet. Back then, we got our news via the paper or the TV screen. Even 24-hour news was in its infancy. Nowadays, the news world is a fragmented sphere of articles placed on our devices and in our feeds via a variety of social media tools shared by our friends and family. Data flows extremely rapidly and easily gets amplified and distorted. That's why my colleague, Alexander Scholz, and I decided to take another look at the issue, asking how the SETI post-detection protocols should change to reflect our super-connected world. We quickly realized that scientists need guidance before starting the experiment, let alone after making a detection. It is now common practice for new scientific projects to set up a blog about their work, and this will be essential for SETI. The blog should include a clear description of what a certain project will do and what the criteria are for a successful detection, a false positive, and no detection. This would help journalists and the public alike to avoid misinterpreting the results. Forgan notes that the individuals involved need to be credible communicators of their work, so maintaining good digital presence in the early stages is very helpful. We also recommend they update their security settings to protect against nefarious individuals broadcasting their personal information, which is sadly a real risk these days. If a team is lucky enough to make even an unconfirmed tentative detection, they must be sure to have nothing to hide. Leaks are unavoidable and alarmingly rapid. Nobody wants an aliens found story that turns out to be false. The best way to do this is to publish data immediately. If it's very clear that the detection is unconfirmed and natural or man-made causes can't be ruled out, then there is no room for conspiracy theorists to wail about the scientists' collusion with the men in black. It also gives other scientists the chance to check the work and verify the detection. Forgan closes with the following observation. Whoever discovers intelligent life should also prepare for it to swallow up the rest of their life. There isn't going to be time for much else. Their new job will instead be to help humanity come to terms with its new identity, just one of multiple intelligent civilizations in the universe. Acta Astronautica, according to its website, is a journal sponsored by the International Academy of Astronautics. Content is based on original contributions in all fields of basic engineering, life and social space sciences, and of space technology, related to the peaceful scientific exploration of peace, its exploitation for human welfare and progress, as well as the conception, design, development, and operation of spaceborne and Earth-based systems. In addition to regular issues, the journal publishes selected proceedings of the annual International Aeronautical Congress, transactions of the IAA, and special issues on topics of current interest, such as microgravity, space station technology, geostationary orbits, and space economics. Other subject areas include satellite technology, space transportation and communications, space energy, power and propulsion, astrodynamics, extraterrestrial intelligence, and Earth observations. How to tell the people? Perhaps John Podesta may have said it best back in 2002 when he first began to push for those revelations. He said, "It's time to find out what the truth really is that's out there. We ought to do it, really, because it's right. We ought to do it, quite frankly, because the American people and the world can handle the truth. And we ought to do it because it's the law." Over to science and tech-related news now. Many people have begun moving into spaces of awareness where they either know, sense, or just simply want to exit the so-called rat race and find opportunities to exist among like-minded, like-hearted people of a similar space of awareness and commitment. There are pros and cons to this. On the positive side, an article appearing on the fastcoexist.com website shares the story of a project unfolding outside of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. The project is called Regen Village, and the community does not need a grid, nor does it need food systems, for it is a fully closed-loop settlement. According to the article, Amsterdam suburb, your dining room might be next to an indoor vegetable garden. Outside, you'll have another seasonal garden. And down the street, almost everything you eat will be grown in high-tech vertical farms. The neighborhood will be the first Regen Village, a new type of community designed to be fully self-sufficient, growing its own food, making its own energy, and handling its own waste in a closed loop. What does it mean to be a closed-loop system? The article explains with the following. Any household waste can be composted and will feed livestock or soldier flies. The soldier flies will feed fish, and fish waste will fertilize an aquaculture system that produces fruit and vegetables for the homes. Seasonal gardens will be fertilized by waste from the livestock. By using the most advanced methods for growing food, a combination of aeroponics, aquaponics, permaculture, food forests, and high-yield organic farming, the neighborhood will grow many times more food than a traditional farm of the same size, with fewer resources. Aquaponics, for example, can produce 10 times as much produce on the same amount of land with 90% less water. It goes beyond even this, however. The article continues. The community will also produce its own energy using a mixture of geothermal, solar thermal, wind, and biomass. We're looking at some very interesting technologies for small footprint biomass that can take surrounding farm waste and turn that into a consistent energy source in a way that can power these communities in Northern Europe even in the dead of winter. This, according to James Ehrlich, CEO of Regen Villages. A smart grid will distribute power efficiently, sending it to a carport to charge shared electric cars as needed. A biogas plant will turn any non-compostable household waste into power and water. A water storage system will collect rainwater and grey water and redistribute it to seasonal gardens and the aquaponics system. Regen Villages is based out of California and partnered with Effect, a Danish architectural firm, to design the initial community in the Netherlands. The first project will consist of about 100 homes located about 20 minutes from Amsterdam. Future projects include Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Germany, and beyond in the world. The company's vision also includes plans for a village that can be adapted to drier climates, such as those in the Middle East. The project in the Netherlands is expected to be completed by 2017. It was my personal observation that the houses and buildings were still being designed as squares and rectangles with sharper corners. My personal preference would be to have a house that has softer, more rounded corners, so the energies can flow better in a home. It is unclear whether or not any consideration was given to feng shui, or sacred geometry, in terms of the construction of the buildings or the community itself, and what materials were used for the construction. However, the vision behind the project is a promising one, at least, and those who feel drawn to the particular energies of each community will be drawn there for their own personal reasons and growth. As mentioned earlier, communities such as these come with challenges also, and some of these challenges deal with humans and their egos. An article appearing on the Permies.com website, the author shares some common reasons why eco-villages often fail. The author writes the following: save the world, work with like-minded neighbors, enjoy a lifestyle full of healthy choices and cooperation. It seems like an all-around win-win situation, doesn't it? So why do so many budding eco-villages fail to get out of the planning stages? The author suspects it has to do with one's lofty plans, rarely translating into a clear vision that others can get behind. He writes, armchair activism makes it very easy to say you care about a cause, but when the time comes to get out and participate, things change. Joining a community is a huge jump. It isn't as easy as just paying your dues and going in gung-ho. There is a lot to consider. The author explores how people need to be aware of what is expected and what will be offered in terms of transparency, in terms of the land itself, in terms of leadership, and also considering barriers. There is also the challenge that, although many claim they are committed to the idea of living in this way, it's possible that their egos may not yet have caught up to their hearts. They come with the idealized vision that everyone thinks the same way as they do, only to discover that the same way of thinking may have many multiple shades of gray, and thus there will be minor disagreements, if not major conflicts. Everyone may not quite be on the same page, despite one's best intentions or the best intentions of the community. The communities, however, are a promising start, and at least getting people together of like-minded energies begins to bring people into spaces of awareness and support, where healing has the potential to take place. Finally, in health-related news, it has often been said that our planet has the potential to give us all everything that we need for our health, our growth, and our spiritual advancement. Those individuals who have been a part of the global cabal, either directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously, have contributed in ways that have attempted to limit human health for the purposes of fear, control, and profit. They have also sought to keep hidden and suppressed many of the potential tools that could benefit humanity in its journey to awaken from the sleep of being trapped in this very limited three-dimensional space of awareness that humanity has found itself existing in. The rainforests have had many of the natural medicines to heal, but the forests were destroyed for lumber. The indigenous cultures possessed the earth wisdom to use those natural cures, but they were either killed off or paraded onto reservations or into Western social structures, where their spirituality, their cultures, their languages, and their wisdom began to disappear. Chemicals in the water, in the air, and in vaccines were designed to keep children and people dumbed down and unable to connect to one's own inner, higher wisdom through the pineal gland, among others. Where certain natural plants could not be patented, they were criminalized, and media campaigns sought to demonize natural substances that could assist individuals not only to heal, but also to connect to their higher selves through various experiences in altered consciousness. Over the years, CVN has looked at several such substances, such as ayahuasca, San Pedro, marijuana, cannabis, just to name a few. Among this list now also includes psychedelic mushrooms, magic mushrooms, or just shrooms, as some call them. An article by Michael Forrester appearing on the PreventDisease.com website on May 20th observes the continuing shift towards the recognition that magic mushrooms can play in terms of treating depression, or perhaps also in facilitating connections to one's higher consciousness. The article writes, "First cannabis and now magic mushrooms are slowly being introduced back into the vocabulary of medical scientists. Shamans have known for millennia that the benefits of psychedelics for human health far exceed any perceived risks, which are close to none. The spiritual benefits are undisputed by those in shamanic practices. However, the physical effects have been difficult to relay to the medical community. A first-of-its-kind study on magic mushrooms shows it may soon be recognized as a viable treatment for depression. The trial aimed to test whether psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, could reduce symptoms of or completely eliminate depression." Forrester continues, "Psilocybin mushrooms are one of 5 powerful psychedelics that treat mental disorders and change human consciousness. They have long been studied for their spiritual effects. In 2006, Johns Hopkins University studied psilocybin in particular and found that 1/3 of all participants reported that the experience was the single most spiritually significant moment of their lives, and more than 2/3 reported it was among the top 5 most spiritually significant experiences. 2 months after the study, 79% of the participants reported increased well-being or satisfaction. Friends, relatives, and associates confirmed this. Psilocybin mushrooms have played a big part in human history. There are over 190 different species of psilocybin mushrooms, and it appears that much research of the last century has been covered up. Forrester notes that from the late 1950s to the early 1970s, research was carried out exploring the use of hallucinogens to treat the existential anxiety, despair, and isolation, often associated with advanced stage cancer. Those studies described critically ill individuals undergoing psychospiritual epiphanies, often with powerful and sustained improvement in mood and anxiety, as well as diminished need for narcotic pain medication. A medical journal website specializing in psychiatry called TheLancet.com published an open-label feasibility study on May 17th, researching psilocybin as offering support for depression. According to this paper, psilocybin is a serotonin receptor agonist that occurs naturally in some mushroom species. Recent studies have assessed the therapeutic potential of psilocybin for various conditions, including end-of-life anxiety, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and smoking and alcohol dependence, with promising preliminary results. Here we aimed to investigate the feasibility, safety, and efficacy of psilocybin in patients with unipolar treatment-resistant depression. The research by the team indicates that the study provides preliminary support for the safety and efficacy of psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression and motivates further trials with more rigorous designs to better examine the therapeutic potential of this approach. Reading between the lines, what it essentially is saying is that science is only beginning to catch up and accept what has really been known for centuries but covered up for the purposes of human control. Forrester's article offers a piece of information that would give a suggestion as to why the global cabal would be fearful of people using psilocybin mushrooms. He writes that while the psychedelic state has been previously compared with dreaming, the opposite effect has been observed in the brain work from which we get our sense of self, called the default mode network or ego system. Put simply, while activity became louder in the emotion system, it became more disjointed and so quieter in the ego system. So as opposed to a dreaming state, the research now seems to publicly acknowledge that psilocybin mushrooms actually induce a separation in the mind from the ego to allow one to silence the noise and begin to sit in the space of silence where one's higher self may be able to communicate with oneself. CVN does not advocate the use of these for healing the general populations. Each soul is uniquely different, and therefore any substance is not necessarily guaranteed to help every individual. Each individual must do his or her own research and check in with one's own body to determine if such an experience is needed, and, if it is needed, to find the right plant or fungus, or any other source for that matter, that will help one in one's journey. In this week's Final Words, I'd like to continue a bit more on these energies that we are all going through at this time, and maybe try to offer some perspectives for consideration. In the past, I have spoken of this shift in human and planetary consciousness, and I have also spoken of a transition from a more three-dimensional paradigm and perception into a fourth-dimensional paradigm and perception, and into a broader fifth-dimensional paradigm and perception. I do not wish to debate the technicalities of definitions of what we currently know as dimensions. There are sources that define 3D as having a physical length, width, and height component. Some have defined fourth dimension as adding a component of time. Assuming this to be true, then humanity has been in a fourth dimensional awareness for a long time. So it comes down to one's own belief and feeling. I'm not saying that I have any more or any less wisdom than any listener, so please do not accept anything I share or anything others share in these final words as truth unless it feels right for you to do so. Dimensions go beyond this, however, to refer more to spaces of consciousness. An article by Vidya Fraser from 2011 attempts to share this author's perceptions of what the third, fourth, and fifth dimensions are in terms of consciousness. She writes, "The third-dimensional operating system runs on rigid beliefs and a fairly inflexible set of rules and limitations. For example, in the third dimension, we learn to believe that bodies are solid. They can't merge with each other or walk through walls. Everything is subject to gravity. Physical objects cannot disappear, and we cannot read another person's mind. There's a solid belief in duality and judgment and fear, and these are pervasive in our society." This is in terms of the fourth dimension, she writes that this is the bridge we're all pretty much on right now and will be for a relatively short period of time. In traveling through the fourth dimension, we are preparing ourselves for the fifth. Time is no longer linear in the fourth dimension. There's an ongoing sense of being present in present time with no interest or even awareness of past and future. We can discover that time is malleable. It can actually stretch and condense, much to our third-dimensional surprise. Fraser describes the fifth dimension as being the dimension of love, of living totally from the heart. In order to enter the fifth dimension and stay there, all mental and emotional baggage must be left at the door. No fear, anger, hostility, and guilt exist there. No suffering or sense of separation. Mastery over thought is a prerequisite. Manifestation in the fifth dimension is instantaneous. You think about something, it becomes present. People generally communicate through telepathy and have the ability to read each other's thoughts and feelings with ease. The experience of time is radically different. Some describe it as everything happening at once. There is no distinction between past, present, or future. Many of us are having experiences or dreams that feel like visits to the fifth dimension. These are exhilarating, tremendously exciting, and hopeful. They keep us moving on through the difficulties that sometimes arise as we travel through the fourth dimension and into the fifth. What I believe I can say with a high degree of confidence is that we are all in uncharted waters right now. In our current life path, meaning in the last 100 years, none of us has experienced the particular energetics and cosmic alignments that are contributing to what we are now going through and how it is impacting the collective consciousness, but also on the individual consciousness and each individual physical body in ways that people may know, sense, and feel, but are lacking the full awareness and understanding of how and why. It is my belief, therefore, that many sources have pieces of information, but there are very, very few, if any, among us who are able to offer a full and complete picture of what is going on, and this highlights the importance of learning to discern what will be true for each individual, because the life path of each individual is uniquely different, yet equally beautiful, and therefore each individual will therefore need different messages, different messengers, and different interpretations to guide one on his or her path right now. No path is more right, nor is it more wrong, for it is unique only to the one following that particular path. Have you also been feeling different lately? Perhaps not feeling yourself, or perhaps having the feeling that things just don't seem quite as real as they used to? If so, you are not alone. Perhaps you are sensing change coming on different levels. An article by Greg Prescott on the in5d.com website offers a couple of videos for consideration, but also 13 signs that one may be ready to live on the new earth. Many who are just awakening may not understand that term, and it may be equally as challenging to try to explain it. It is difficult to explain a fifth, sixth, or seventh dimensional perception to an awareness that can only perceive 3 or maybe 4. I personally do believe in multiple dimensions of existence and awareness, even though I admit that I still do not fully understand what it means and feels like to be in those dimensional spaces of awareness. Once one makes a choice, at least, one can begin the journey towards opening up to these new experiences and awareness that comes with each dimensional space. If you are open, then perhaps you have been feeling some or all of the following 13 signs. Constantly experiencing synchronicities on various levels, manifesting desires with greater ease, a change in eating habits, dreams becoming more prophetic and less fearful, a strong desire for truth to be known, even if it contradicts one's current system of belief. You seem to understand fear more, and it is becoming easier to release it. You may be sensing a thinning of dimensions, and this may include seeing and hearing things that one was not able to do previously. Perhaps you have experienced glitches in time, or time loops. Perhaps you have begun drifting away from friends and family who no longer understand you. Maybe you have been experiencing unusual energy shifts or hearing high-pitched frequencies. There may be many of you having a strong desire to go home, wherever that may be, including a different planet. Finally, perhaps you are experiencing metaphysical abilities that you never thought you could do before. There may be others also. One of the messages of the article is that each choice one makes essentially creates a new alternate reality. Enelia Benz, in one of her articles for the month of May, appearing on her Ascension101.com website, outlines symptoms of another kind, but are related to at least one of the previous items discussed. Benz writes of timeline jumping, and she offers some insights that some of you may have experienced consciously or unconsciously. She writes that the physical body elemental is not at all happy with the shifting and moving of timelines. When this starts happening, the body becomes highly stressed and tense. This causes cramps and also pain on the back of the neck and shoulders, with a feeling of something tight around the head or a headache that won't go away. A sense that you don't know what you are doing in that house or that workplace. It suddenly feels unfamiliar and that you belong somewhere else. Fantastic alternative daydreams about your own past, memories that you know never happened. You may have had a moment or more moments when you had no idea where you were, who the people around you were, and thought perhaps you were getting Alzheimer's or another type of mental incapacity. You clearly know that the decision you just took has marked your life forever. The change might be slow to appear, but it is permanent. Your body suddenly heals, or some unknown ailment is suddenly identified and the right treatment is also available. There is an interest you have had for years for which there was hardly any information, and suddenly there are hundreds of books and websites about it out there. You go to someone's house, sometimes your own, and there is an object there that is different to how we remember it, a different color, shape, location, design, and you disregard the unfamiliarity because it must have been always like that. Yet, you noticed it was now different. Sentences like, "Oh, I never noticed that lamp had a string switch," or "I always thought that dresser was turquoise, but it's blue." People around you seem slightly unfamiliar, although you have known them a long time, or your entire life. It feels to your body like you have just met. How might one deal with this then? Benz writes that first of all, we can understand and relax into them. No, you are not mad and are not losing your mind. Your memories haven't suddenly gone awry. And secondly, realize that this is a great opportunity for you to make a lifelong commitment to live on your highest frequency by choice. Become interested in your surroundings, in your life choices, in your people. Most of all, know that this is real, and that we are going through this step in our evolution where we can, if we so choose, to be aware of how subtle reality really is, and how thin the walls between dimensions and timelines really are. It is a very exciting time. Know that you can now consciously choose highly resonant timelines. Now, some listeners may be wondering about the earlier statement of feeling a desire to return home, even if it is another planet. If you've had a feeling such as this, perhaps it is possible you are a star seed. An article by Tanaz from September of 2015 on the in5d.com website offers 21 signs that might suggest you are a star seed. Here are approximately 10 of them. You feel a strong sense of knowing that Earth is not your original home. You feel out of place and that the rules of society go against your beliefs. You have recurring dreams about spaceships or extraterrestrials. You are highly psychic or intuitive and sensitive to your surroundings. You often see UFOs or have a strong affinity to space, time travel, and the spirit world. You are naturally technologically savvy and have a different way of problem solving. You are empathic to others' emotions and can pick up on what others are feeling. You may have a body that functions differently compared to others. You are extremely intelligent but are not interested in conventional academics. You constantly feel challenged to awaken or reconnect with your purpose. You can only handle large crowds of people for short periods of time. Life on Earth may at times feel boring or disappointing to you, especially when you are reminded of where you came from. The rest of this list will appear in the show summary for the final words, and also in the link to the article for those choosing to read more. Tanaz adds that It is believed that starseeds have a programmed alarm clock inside of them that allows them to awaken at different points in their lives in order to fulfill their destiny. Perhaps this is what we are starting to witness at this time, and why the global cabal is so eager to make more and more people sick in any way they can. It is indeed an exciting time, and people are beginning to unite more in heart, mind, and spirit to manifest the changes we are all claiming to want, while also attempting to help each other move forward through our own personal journey of releasing that which no longer serves us. Create a wonderful week until our next moment of now. So that is a sample of the unfolding higher consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is broadcast weekly from the CosmicVisionNews.com website. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary, which is available on the blog on the website. CVN can be followed through its Facebook page, Scene page, YouTube channel, as well as on Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that the most common way people give away their power is in believing that they don't have any. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.